We now have more variants of wiper malware than we do months of 2022. And for those of you that have been keeping up with my videos on this, I know, I missed one of them. What can I say? I mean, this has just been going on so quickly that it's hard to keep up sometimes. But let's talk about the one that I missed real quick before we dive right into the new variant. We're going to talk about ESET first. It appears to have been deployed right around the exact same time of Hermetic Wiper, which we did cover on this channel. From what I've seen, it also had similar signed certificates that allowed it to bypass AV to Hermetic Wiper. However, from what I understand, it's not a direct relative of Hermetic Wiper, but it also has a logging feature, and as ESET Research points out, that might be because of failed executions of some of the other wiper malware, and this was allowing the attackers to kind of understand why exactly the wiper malware was failing to execute and basically use that logging to better perfect the malware. So that's one of the nice, interesting features of ESET malware. But that's not the malware that we are talking about in this video. That's right, we have a fourth kind of wiper malware. Thanks to our dear friends at the SVR. ESET Research recently published a little bit of analysis on the new strain of wiper malware dubbed Caddywiper. It's like a less fun version of Caddyshack because this is actually designed to make your day worse, whereas golf allegedly is supposed to make your day better. Just don't ask anybody that's actually golfed because they always seem angry at the end. They do note initially that there does not appear to be any kind of code relation to Hermetic Wiper, ESET Wiper, or Whispergate. And while from a technical sense it appears that there is no relationship to the previous strains of wiper malware, it's kind of hard not to miss some sort of operational relationship to the other malware, not only given the time that all this malware was deployed, the specific target set being Ukrainian entities. It certainly gives the impression that if they are not technically related, then they surely are operationally related. ESET also doesn't make any attribution statement in this analysis, and I don't think that we've seen any attribution on some of the other wiper malware breakdowns before either. However, again, given the context, it's kind of hard not to know who exactly might be behind this. Oh no! ESET also doesn't really go into much detail on what specific drives this malware targets. However, from the code, you can certainly see that it targets just about any drive that it can get its hands on, up to and including the master boot record and hidden folders. So it seems to operate very similarly to other wiper malware that we've talked about in that it enumerates the file system and identifies other partitions and external volumes, and it will overwrite all that data with basically just gibberish designed to make the machine inoperable and the data unrecoverable. However, this is where things get pretty interesting. ESET does point out that this malware appears to be coming from domain controllers, and it actually will verify the host system if it is not a domain controller. And how does it spread throughout the Active Directory domain? Well, group policy objects. So this clearly shows that the attackers must have some sort of control over the network prior to deploying the malware itself. And I think that that's pretty interesting, and we're going to talk about why here in just a moment. It's hard not for me, at least personally, to think a little bit that I'm wondering if this malware might be a cleanup operation and also hand in hand with a destruction operation, since the attackers must have already had access to the network before. And that also depends on who the attackers are. If they are Russian, then it's hard not to see how this could be a cleanup and destruction operation. If they're not Russian, well, then that would be a plot twist. But let's kind of unpack this situation. First, this shows how Russia is unleashing hybrid warfare in Ukraine. We've talked a lot about what hybrid warfare is already on this channel, so stay tuned to the end and I'm going to link you to a playlist and a video that you can check out and learn some more about that. But this also goes hand in hand with a recent statement by the Ukrainian government that that's exactly what is happening. Second, and I've talked about this on the same video that I'm going to link at the end and other places in this playlist, but this is what I would imagine a cyber war would actually look like. And this is kind of the one way that we can verify that we haven't gotten to a global cyber war yet. If we start seeing wiper malware cropping up in other parts of the world like Europe or North America, then yeah, we might actually have a real problem on our hands. But until then, despite what a lot of folks on social media that don't seem to exactly know what they're talking about are saying, no, we haven't gotten to that point yet. And I think it is important to recognize the Ukrainians not only for defending this long and this hard, but also for exfiltrating a lot of this data that we and the rest of the world can use to analyze this malware and kind of understand what the Russians might be employing in future operations if this war expands beyond just Ukraine. And that takes us to the third thing I want to talk about, and this is where things can get a little concerning, is that we don't exactly know what happened prior to the deployment and execution of this malware. And unfortunately, in some cases, we may never know. Like I've said, and like what ESET pointed out, this malware is getting deployed using group policy objects from the domain controller. So that basically shows that the attackers already had access and a pretty good position on the network prior to sending out this malware. They could have done anything from putting in all kinds of spyware like keyloggers to exfiltrating data that could be used later. And in this case, where there is an act where this is all going on in an active war zone, that information that they're exfiltrating isn't something that necessarily that they would use later for like trade negotiations and to gain extra leverage. This is something that could actually be converted to real military intelligence depending on what data is being exfiltrated and what kind of use it would be used for. All of that happening before this malware gets deployed, and then it overwrites the entire file system. So even if there were logging systems that would have caught that kind of behavior and allowed for, a blue team or forensics team to be able to figure out what was going on later, that data might all be gone because of this malware. And then of course it targets the master boot drive and destroys the system, so it makes it incredibly challenging to be able to gain these kinds of insights later on in the future. What is interesting that ESET did point out is that there have been some cases where this wiper malware has failed to run, and that's really what created the newest iteration of Caddywiper to basically include that logging functionality, so that way the attackers could troubleshoot and make sure that the malware does run. So in some cases where the target systems did have the wiper malware, but the malware failed to detonate, then we might actually be able to get some of those insights that might be helpful down the road to understand some of what the attackers were doing. But until we're able to get some sort of access and data from those systems before obviously the attackers do, we may not know. Now, this is actually a pretty complex topic. It fits into a wider picture that is also pretty complex. So check out the top video for a bit of a larger overview on what we're talking about, and the playlist definitely for a lot more information on what we're talking about and for kind of a better idea on what is going on in Ukraine as it relates to cybersecurity, because this is something that all of us are going to need to be aware about. Also, be sure to share this with a friend and hit that like button, because it not only helps the channel, but it helps raise awareness on the cybersecurity issues as it relates to this conflict. So with all that, I'll see you all next time. Bye.